Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Daniel Umstead, host of the RNG radio show. I'm just having back-to-back gurus. So my next guest, let me just run into his bio real quick. My next guest is the co-founder, senior managing member, and chief acquisitions officer at Amerinote Xchange. He's been operating with the primary and secondary mortgage markets for the past 2 decades. So he's seen some highs, seen some lows, and he's seen some in-betweens. His background lies in residential and commercial mortgage loan origination. He made the full transition into the secondary market and whole loan acquisitions realm in early 2006. As an experienced debt investor, he is also one of the expert contributors on the world of private note trading for Cash Value Exclusive magazine and website. Now, where's he been at? Industry publications include Realtor.com, Yahoo Finance, Go Bacon Rates, Yahoo News, and now RNG Radio Show, including a myriad of podcasts that he's been on. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mr. Shemesh. Abby, how are you doing today, sir?
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm doing fantastic, and I want to extend my thanks to you to allow me to be on the show and contribute to your platform.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So let's rewind prior to 2006. Amerinote Xchange is probably floating around your head somewhere as far as getting started. Tell me a story. What got you into doing this? What did you pretty much see out there in the world as a need? And, why did you take this avenue with the Amerinote Xchange?
It's a very great question, and I appreciate the opportunity. And it's really simple. I started, as a very green junior loan officer in the late 90s, early 2000s, worked my way up through in your section of the world in the Pennsylvania, Philadelphia area, working for a mortgage loan originator, learning the ropes. I was the basic, I was the guy that you would speak to if you wanted to purchase a house or refinance. And of course, at that time, we had started to see changes in the way that mortgage underwriting and mortgage appetite, we'll call it, for banks were being processed and underwritten for the sole purpose of America really getting into the globalized market and providing financial instruments like mortgage-backed securities to pension funds in France and Singapore, Thailand. So really, with the repealing of the Glass-Steagall Act, opened the floodgates for what they call nowadays the subprime mortgage market. Back in that day, there was a ferocious need for mortgage loan originators, mortgage bankers, mortgage brokers. I entered the space at that point, and really it kind of took off from there. So that was late 99, early 2000. At that point, I was just kind of making my way through my career journey with a small firm, which I very much so appreciate the opportunity for them giving me a chance to start off. Moved on to a larger firm out of New Jersey, which kind of expanded my experiential footprint into commercial and residential, both refinances and purchases, not just in the Pennsylvania jurisdiction, but across 16 different states, primarily on the East Coast. So that really opened my eyes to the way that the world works with regards to real estate financing, identifying deals, watching what banks and how banks underwrite borrowers, risk analysis, really getting into pretty intricate conversations with borrowers at those times, understanding motivation. So all of this was a tremendous learning experience. And to answer your question directly, we discovered I discovered the secondary mortgage market through our, at that time, Bear Stearns account executive who was moving to acquisitions. The Bear Stearns executive approached us and said, "Hey, I'm moving on. This is your new exec." And got to talking. I said, "Well, where are you going?" He said, "I'm going over to acquisitions." And he really educated me on what acquisitions was, I didn't even know there was a secondary mortgage market and how that market worked. And it just got the wheels turning. So I started doing some research and really started to discover very, very quickly that, Mortgage business, primary mortgage market, the lending of of money to purchase real estate is a pretty saturated market, right? There's thousands of lenders out there. There's thousands of banks out there. There's a lot of competition. And then when I started looking into this, I'm like, not so much saturation in the secondary mortgage market space. There's not a lot of players. It's a little bit off the beaten path. It's kind of the same underwriting process. It's kind of the same product. It's comparable to the same kinds of earnings, I guess you can say, with an added caveat where you can start making money for yourself as opposed to making money for large banks and institutions, right? So you can kind of flip the script a little bit. And in our research, we realized, wow, there's not a lot of competition, and the competition that's there is like very easy to stand out from the crowd based on my experience with marketing and in the mortgage space for that period of time. So this is now 2004,
Mhm.
2005. So 4 years in, got some good experience, made the full transition, and I took the leap from the primary mortgage market into the secondary mortgage market with the founding of Amerinote Exchange in early 2006. And then, as they say, the rest is history.
Okay. What was that mindset for you? Because I get a lot of people who are either on the show who have still their 9 to 5s, and they have their business, or audience, they're trying to figure out, like, well, I got a good decent W-2 right now. I don't see myself making that switch. During that time, what was that mindset for you, like, to say, like, okay, I'm making the leap, this is what I want to do? Like, how did you turn that on? How did you turn that on and say, I don't need this W-2 anymore, I need to be fully focused on Amerinote Exchange?
It was not an easy transition. I understand the fear that exists in an entrepreneurial spirit that kind of starts bubbling up when you're like, I need to make the jump here. I need to do something for myself and my family and my future and my wealth generation, or generational wealth, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it. And it was not it all starts here. It really is. The journey started where I kind of I was lucky enough to be in an adjacent industry, right? So it wasn't like I was, selling refrigerators and then I went into the mortgage business, you know what I mean?
Right.
It was a very adjacent industry. So um, the transition was easier, but it did take a minute for me to make that full leap because look, we were all making a good amount of money in the early 2000s in the mortgage business. And I saw the writing on the wall. I knew what we were like. These banks were coming in and they were saying, push these, um, subprime loans. I don't care if the credit score is 525. Push them, push them, push. And I started doing, in my research overall, I was like, well, it doesn't sound so sustainable. And I kind of started getting the idea that this was a bubble. I was not nearly as educated as I am now, and kind of ingrained in the monetary system and the perch that I currently operate from. But even the younger Abby 20 years ago kind of knew something was a little off. So I was like, let's just go into this industry. And I made that full transition. What I did is I started, honestly, so the bottom line is, in the mortgage business, I was at that time, the industry that we were working in, it was very easy to get leads. So if you work for a mortgage company, the mortgage company wouldn't say, hey, you need to go out and cultivate and harvest your own leads. They would say, hey, we're paying for marketing. All you got to do is answer our phone and you're going to have deals. Just take the information and it's that simple.
Right.
Those days are gone, right? But in the commercial space, it wasn't that easy. So I started marketing myself to CPAs, to attorneys. I started building blog posts and web pages to market myself so I can have commercial leads come my way in addition to, so I can build my book of business. And I was learning a whole heck of a lot about marketing especially digital marketing, which was in its early infancy back then. There wasn't a lot of pay-per-click, and I think you had Yahoo was the primary search engine at that point. There was no Google pay-per-click at that point, or it was just coming online. Google wasn't even a thing. I mean, it started in '99, but it kind of took off in 2004. Could be mistaken about that, but something along those lines. So we were really getting our sea legs, if you would, in the marketing space. And what I did is when I left the primary mortgage market, I was temporarily involved with affiliate marketing where I was selling financial ebooks, how to repair credit, how to structure your credit to tee yourself up for a refinance. Back in the day, there was a lot of ARM mortgages, adjustable rate mortgages, where people would take ARMs for the lower interest rate, but they didn't realize that they had 2 years later, they had to refinance out. Right, exactly. We would put together ebooks to tell them exactly how to do that. And there was a lot of credit hacks and tips and tricks that we wrote a full-on credit repair book. We would promote that and sell that. And that kind of put some food on the table, so to speak, during the transition. So we got creative. I mean, we got creative and we were in a very unique position to do that. So we were just, I was leveraging all of my talents at the time. And I didn't realize that I can meld affiliate marketing into the note business, because no one was digital marketing back then. And that's what gave us the edge. For low overhead, we were a remote company to begin with. So we weren't really intentionally going to have an office with like 300 staff. We need to be mobile. We need to be lean. We need to be nimble. We need to be able to compete with large institutions. And the only way to do that is through nimbleness and low overhead. So that was the goal. And we started to execute, and we started to get lift very quickly. Once the website was live, and once the marketing was in place, which I just basically took my marketing apparatus from our originations and the affiliate marketing space, which I was selling financial ebooks, just for ourselves personally, credit repair and that kind of thing. And I just superimposed that onto the mortgage note business. A couple bumps and bruises on the way, but within 1-2 quarters, we were flying. We had lift, and we were off the ground, and we were coasting. And then from there, it just went upward. And of course, 2008 happened, and that's a whole other story, which we actually thrived through. But there was definitely some learning experiences there as well.
Love that. Now, Amerinote Xchange, and this is pretty much for all the audience members and our folks that are listening right now. Somebody's going to this website, they're clicking on it. They're seeing 4 options on there, note buyers, what else is on there? Services, learn more, seller tips. This ideal person that's going to your website, what should they be doing? I mean, outside of, going straight to the contact us or get a quote, what should they be doing to get more information to see, like, hey, is Amerinote Xchange going to be beneficial for me and me working with Abby and his team?
That's a great question. The first thing I will say, just to avoid confusion, is in the mortgage business, you have the primary mortgage market, again, which is the lending of money to purchase real estate, whether commercial, residential, bare land, manufactured home, whatever. The secondary mortgage market is where the existing mortgage loans are then traded and sold between investors and entities. So Amerinote Xchange operates in the secondary loan market. We do not lend money to people who are looking to buy houses, to people who are looking to buy commercial properties. So the first thing you ask yourself is, if you go to Amerinote Xchange and you say, okay, I am involved in a mortgage somehow, some way, the question you ask yourself first and foremost, am I making a mortgage payment or am I collecting a mortgage payment? We assist and serve the community that is collecting a mortgage payment. If you're making a mortgage payment and you have questions and require advice, I can most certainly speak intelligently on tips and hacks and tricks that way. But I will say that if you are collecting a mortgage payment, that is going to be the community we serve. We serve mortgage lenders, mortgage holders. These are institutions, individuals, hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, family offices, banks, as I mentioned, institutions, anyone. It can be private corporations, anyone who's collecting a monthly payment on a loan secured by real estate. That is who we serve. We can provide liquid, or I should say liquidity exits or off ramps if you are currently collecting on a mortgage and you need to recycle your capital out of that investment and recycle it into another investment. Or in the case of a private lender, you inherited a mortgage loan that Uncle Bob was collecting on because he was a private lender. Uncle Bob's no longer with us. He left a couple mortgage loans to you. Now you're stuck. A lot of people would say stuck. Others would say that would be a privilege, but you're stuck now collecting payments and having to keep records and deal with these borrowers. And you have this $300 a month payment trickling in and you're owed $100,000. You don't want to deal with all that. You just want to get your money and you want to have some sort of lifestyle change. I want to move out of the country. I want to move to this state. I want to move, buy a new house. I want to, start a new business. There's some sort of lifestyle change. We can provide an opportunity where we can cash you out of that mortgage so you can take the money that you're owed in full or close to and go continue on with your financial goals.
Okay. Now, just to be clear, and this is something that I heard from one of the other podcasts, it's not exactly on the dollar, though. Is that correct? So if somebody's got, and I'm just throwing this number out here, somebody's owing $1 million and their monthly mortgage is $1,000, you're not saying, oh yeah, come to us, we'll give you the $1 million. It's nothing like that, correct?
Correct. Now, there are some, there's a sliding scale. There's very rare cases. It depends. I'm going to use some, basic terms, but it depends how pretty the note is, right? So,
okay.
The note structure, the borrower background, and the characteristics surrounding the property securing the note will all determine how much that note will sell for when you bring it to market. The average first position mortgage loan, both institutional, meaning a bank created loan, and a private loan, meaning a seller finance loan, will sell for, on the extreme low end, for about 65 cents on the dollar of the unpaid principal balance, as high as 98 and a half cents on the dollar on the extreme high end. So it could be a very, very small discount. Do we buy loans for 100 cents on the dollar? We have. Very rare cases, but it does happen. It happens, I would say, maybe once or twice a year, maybe. The majority.
Pretty good looking notes.
They're good looking notes, and they are well secured in very desirable jurisdictions, geographic locations. It's very important. So there's a lot of things to like and not like about a note. And there, when we basically look under the hood, there's many different factors that are going to determine the value of a note that, quite frankly, takes time and diligence to kind of investigate. And I can kind of go into that. But 65 cents on the dollar to the high 90 cent on the dollar range. So basically, if you're owed $100,000, or let's use your case, $1 million, that $1 million loan will sell for between $650,000 and $989,000, roughly.
Okay, awesome. And then is there any other parameters? Because I know folks are probably thinking right now, like, well, I got a $1 million multifamily apartment, that my Uncle Bob, unfortunately got hit by a bus, and now that's pretty much being passed down to me. Is there anything else folks that should be aware about before they're reaching out to you that way? Because what I don't want folks to do is saying like, oh, well, what? Uncle Bob just left me an apartment building, man. I'm good. Here we go. Is there any other things that folks should be prepared for prior to speaking to you guys?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, there's several types of contract structure. So every state has a different form of security agreement. So what I mean by that is in Pennsylvania, you have something called a mortgage, which is the actual instrument that tethers the property to the loan, which is referred to as a promissory note or a mortgage note, not to be confused. So I want to get too technical, but those two documents will create the legal lien, the legal debt on record that tethers one to the other. So it allows one to exercise a foreclosure process in the case of default. In the state of California, where our home office is, That's not, they don't, it's not a mortgage state. That is called a deed of trust state, which is a trustee. So the major difference is in a mortgage state, you typically have to go before a judge and get the judge's permission to take your property back in the case of a foreclosure. Whereas in a deed of trust state, you don't need to go before a judge. You can just go through the trustee and have that, work out. It's just a different type of foreclosure. So there's, again, it's the same uniform process. It's just different jurisdictions have different, ways of doing it. Michigan has something called a land contract, typically, and then like New Mexico has something called a real estate contract, which is just one document, no mortgage, no promissory note. It just says real estate contract, and it's both of those documents combined into one. Same thing with a land contract. The reason I'm mentioning this is because you want to identify what Uncle Bob left you. Did he leave you a land contract? Did he leave you a mortgage and a note? Did he leave you a deed of trust and a note? You can easily find out. The second thing I would recommend is you want to make sure that Uncle Bob left you the original ink signatures. It's very, very difficult to transmit and transfer ownership of a mortgage loan if you don't have the original ink signature. And I'll give you an example. When we transfer a mortgage loan, when we sell a mortgage or purchase a mortgage, there's three major documents that are signed. There's others, but the three major documents are the assignment of the mortgage or deed of trust. That's the one that actually gets put on public record and telegraphs to the world that the loan has been sold from Daniel to Abby, right? That's number one. The second document is referred to as a purchase and sale agreement or a mortgage loan purchase agreement. Different states have different names. It's all the same thing. It's basically the terms and conditions of the sale between the parties. That is not public record, that's private. So that's just basically the purchase agreement. The third item is referred to, and this is my point, it's referred to as a note endorsement. Very similar to the same way you would endorse a check to someone. You can't endorse a copy of a check. You can only endorse the original check. The same thing with a promissory note. So you want to make sure you have that original note in hand, the ink signature from the borrower, because that a lot in the state of Florida, where I'm actually currently now for our satellite office in Miami, state of Florida won't allow you to transfer a loan or foreclose on a loan if you do not have the original note. Very, very difficult. So there's ways to fix that. Most states will allow you to fill out something called a lost note affidavit, but the point is you want to make sure that what kind of instrument did Uncle Bob leave you? Because he didn't leave you the building. He probably left you, in our example, he left you the lien holder ownership to the building, the loan, basically. You want to make sure what kind of instruments, what kind of documents do you have? Do you have the original documents? Did Uncle Bob keep good payment history? That's very, very important. If so, do you have access to that payment history, like copies of checks or deposit slips or access to the bank account where the money was coming in? And then those are the three major things that I would say are, everything else we can kind of maneuver and massage through.
All right. I love that, man. I love that. Now, I want to back up a little bit because you started in 2006 and saw the writing on the wall, similar to other folks that are saying like, I don't know why we're pushing out these loans if these folks aren't qualified. So you had your up days, you had your down days. What keeps you motivated? Like, what keeps you going? You've been doing this for, 2 decades now, close to 2 decades now. And, not everybody has good days. Sometimes it's cloudy outside and you're having a great day. Sometimes it's sunny outside and you're having a bad day. What keeps you going, when you do come across those days where it's like, why did I get started in the first place?
It's a really thoughtful question. This answer is going to be different for everybody, I guess. Really, and I'm speaking to the entrepreneurial spirit that is, whether you're starting out and you're running into a lot of speed bumps or you're not getting the good lift, or you're in the process of scaling and you just get bounced around like a tissue on the wind. There are, just like you said, good days and bad days. And what keeps me going is the fact that I guess you can say it depends on the person. I know this may not be the answer that is going to be like a one size fits all, but it might be a one size fits most. I'm the type of person that I'm not crazy about leaving things unfinished if I'm determined to do it. And what keeps me going is stepping away, believe it or not, is stepping away. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm stepping away for good, but
Right.
it very well may mean it could be as simple as getting up from your desk right behind me and going for a walk, taking some deep breaths. I know this is airy fairy and esoteric, but this is what gets me through it. The other ideas that come to mind, and the other things that come to mind, well, most certainly stepping away. If my wife and I have a saying, we don't want to bang it into place. It should most certainly happen effortlessly as much as possible. We try to
Mm.
go, when we talk about going with the flow, that I literally mean riding the energetic wave that life is throwing at you. Those waves are, those electromagnetic waves are hitting us every single day, just like waves in the ocean. What would you do if you saw an onslaught of, you're in the ocean, you're about to get in, you're coming up to your knees, your thighs, your waist, and you start seeing the waves coming in? Well, you have a choice. You can slam right into the waves. You can go underneath the wave. You can kind of move back out of the water. You have a lot of options here. It's really the same thing, but I can tell you that those waves are going to come in fluctuations. It's not going, there's cyclical, there's high tide, there's low tide. We are being bombarded by these electromagnetic forces every day. And, we're not going to get into discussion on what creates those forces, but it's very similar to meteorology. And some days are good, some days are bad. You got to figure out, you know, how to, if you're going to dive in, are you going to go under the wave? Are you going to back up? Are you going to just take the hits? If it rains, if you see rain in the forecast, are you going to hide in your house? No, you're probably just going to bring an umbrella with you and move forward. That's the mindset that I try to have. Now, I'm not going to lie and say, oh, I wake up every day and, I'm like Snow White and I open the windows and the birds come on my fingers, and you know what I mean? Like,
Thank you for joining me this morning.
that's right. It's not all smiles and rainbows every day. There
Right.
is a lot of work mentally and physically that go into navigating the ups and downs, but that is how I do it. Typically, straight answer, short answer is I step away, I take some deep breaths, I do my very best to the best of my ability if I can or not, and I make sure I have enough time for myself personally to process the pressures of the day, because if you don't process them, they will manifest in other very nasty ways, whether it be through health or emotional outbursts, family issues, money issues, substance issues. We're all human in the end, and that's
Mm.
that's what I would say to that.
I love that, man. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I always say for the show that there's going to be people that, are going to listen a week later and be like, wow, that's really impactful. And then a year from now, they're going to listen to the same podcast. And it's like, oh, now I get it. So I appreciate that, because not everything is a now thing, even in fluctuations, as you mentioned before, when somebody's receiving a message, I ask these questions because I want folks to place that seed in their life and realize, like, okay, maybe it's now not the time for me to take this approach. And just like you said, you might just need to step away. I was actually telling my boss this earlier because he was going through something personal. I'm like, yo, just step away, smile, be reacting to life. And he's like, oh man, you just don't understand. I understand that you have life right now. I understand that you breathe it right now. So you need to put some positive sunshine into it. I'm not saying, of course, there's going to be a sing along, with birds coming through the window, but you still got to push through. Abby, a couple more questions up before we wrap up here. I'm big on books. How big am I on books? This is practically what I got to the left of me, about 7 of these. I want to know, what books should folks be reading, or what do you currently have in your library right now that you would recommend for folks to pretty much put in their catalog or put in the library?
Yes, that's a very awesome question. My tastes vary very much so. I'm very much so into modern monetary theory. I'm very much so into history of civilizations, not necessarily like pre-dynastic Egyptian culture, although that's very interesting to me. What I'm talking about more along the lines is the way that economies operated in the medieval times, in like, so, or the similarities between the 1800s, 1700s, and today, economic wise, it's so germane to our conversation, especially with all the central banking maneuvers that's going on, all of the centralization of money, on a global scale that's going on. So the very most interesting book I've read over the past 2 years has been something called The Fourth Turning. I will tell you, it's not a light read. It is a data stream. It's a gentleman by the name of Strauss and Richardson, are the two authors. It was written in the late mid 90s, and it basically went back to the mid 1500s all the way to present. And it basically identifies socioeconomic booms and busts, not necessarily financial, but how culture is cyclical. There's 4 seasons in culture, and it usually lasts anywhere between 80 and 100 years. And it turns out, which is so exciting, that that's right around the same time that our monetary systems go boom and bust, typically about 80 to 100 years.
Wow.
And so they start over. Now they don't really get into too much of that. They start overlaying, like, this is what the culture was like. So the baby boomers, they're the ones that actually coined the term millennials in the book. That's the book that actually coined the term millennials. But they go all the way back, I want to say, to the War of the Roses, which is the families in Great Britain or England that were battling it out back in the 1500s, 1600s. They talked about Queen Elizabeth. They talked about the Reformation, the Lutheran, the Reformation that occurred there, the fight between Catholicism and Lutheran. I'm butchering this, but the other sect of the Christian religion. They go into, of course, the American Revolution. They go into the Civil War. And then they start getting into our section, which is like World War I, World War II, the movement and the hippie movement, the 90s. And then they start predicting the unraveling, which is the height of the unraveling, which is the fourth turning. It's the first turning, second turning, third turning. The fourth turning happens when? 2026. It blows your mind. So that's a very interesting book. The other 2 books, of course, that I read, my favorite book, The Bitcoin Standard, because whether you're in Bitcoin or not, I'm a big a believer in sound money. I'm a big believer in Austrian economics and the history of Austrian economics. But even if you're not into Bitcoin, this book will teach you about what the difference between money is and currency. Very big thing, very interesting, extremely eye-opening. If it was up to me and I was king of the world, I would make this standard reading for everyone in elementary or middle school or high school for sure. Very, very good read there. And then, of course, the one I'm working on right now, which is similar to The Fourth Turning, which is this one right here, The Changing World Order. And this is, of course, our friend Ray Dalio. And this talks about very similar items. This book very much so overlays with The Fourth Turning, and it talks about the booms and busts and the changing orders of, the height of the Dutch Empire, which then moved over to the British Empire, which then moved over to I guess you can say, the French Empire under Napoleon, and then, of course, some would say the American Empire. Really, really interesting stuff. And to be quite honest with you, not to get too crazy, but I find it fascinating once you start looking at cycles. You start looking at. I personally am I'm very esoteric, and I'm starting to experiment with planetary cycles and how these planetary cycles affect how they overlay with books like this and books like The Fourth Turning. And I'm not talking about horoscopes. I'm talking about massive movements. Like, to give you an example, there's a planet that just moved into a different sign 2 weeks ago that hasn't been there since 248 years, which is right around the same time that the American Revolution happened. And we see a lot of similarities to kind of what's going on then and now in our society, not just our society, but on a global scale. So there's interesting similarities and reoccurring themes. And I'm not suggesting that we, put all of our eggs in that basket. But there is a quote. I find this quote to be funny, and I repeat it all the time. I'm not the one who said it, but someone said to me once, Abby, millionaires, they don't believe in astrology, but billionaires do. And that's something that really stuck with me. I'm not suggesting that I'm, talking about horoscopes, but the way planets move, just like if Einstein's theory is correct and you put a bowling, we're holding four corners of a blanket, four of us, and then we drop a bowling ball in the middle and the bowling ball weighs down the blanket, that is Einstein's theory that planets weigh down time and space. So if you have a massive planet like Jupiter circling Earth and creating these electromagnetic waves that behave like water almost, what happens when you drop a boulder into a pond and lily pads are on it on the other end? You're going to tell me that that boulder's not going to affect those lily pads? It absolutely will. We may not see the waves. I find this fascinating. And I think that these waves, just like space weather, affects us the same way that meteorological weather does. So I'm starting to perform experiments, again, not to get too esoteric, but to try to figure this out and see if there's additional movements that correspond, and maybe even document it. So that's where I'm at.
I love that, man. I love that. And, I look at it this way too, because I love the other side of things, because, we started talking about subprime mortgages, and now, going into the theory of space and time, and even how civilizations, are reoccurring, because the expression is always the same. History repeats itself. And folks usually laugh it off like, oh yeah, I've seen this before. But there's actually a deeper meaning behind it. So yeah, stuff like that, such as even, the butterfly effect. I mean, I know Ashton Kutcher did the movie a long time ago, but I look at it and say, that's how we look at things, even when it comes to business. That's why they say do small amounts now, building it up. It's going to have a greater effect in the long run. So no, I appreciate that.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah. Abby, one last question. Outside of going to the website, AmerinoteXchange.com, where else can folks find you at on social media, man?
Thank you for that. Our typical social media activity does occur on Twitter. So we are at Amerinote X, as in the letter X as in X-ray.com. We do participate a little bit on Facebook, but we've nowadays, I say nowadays, over the past couple of years, we've been getting a lot of momentum and movement on Twitter. But we put our social channels are, of course, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. So you can find us at Amerinote Exchange on LinkedIn. You can find us at Amerinote X on Twitter, and then of course Amerinote Exchange on Facebook. And of course, you can find us at our website, AmerinoteXchange.com. The word exchange is only spelled with an X. So that's XCHANGE.com.
Oh man, I love it. Abby, thank you again so much just for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on the show. Definitely looking forward to having you come back on in the future, man.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to the RNG Radio Show. Be sure to like and subscribe for more episodes and future content. If you'd like to learn more, visit us at DanielUmstead.com. Stay blessed, my fellow millionaires.